One spiritual boundary, spiritual discipline is setting boundaries of who you are, how much you can allow others into your life, and all this you do because you know in the end God holds you accountable for how you live your life. Not your pastor, not your bishop, not your spouse. So it needs to be a part of you as a Christian that is totally sold out to God. And as you now relate with others, you are clear which are the areas you allow them to influence and which is the area you cannot allow them to influence. Your friends could backslide, but because their backsliding is outside your area of influence, you will not allow their backsliding activity to actually affect you. So it's very important that a new believer is taught the importance of setting boundaries, not to feel like he has to do everything the pastor says or to do everything the apostle says or to do, because that's how you join chaotic organizations. So if you want a new believer to not end up in a chaotic relationship with people who claim to be spiritual fathers, I think it's important that they are taught very early that the Bible expects them to set boundaries. You know, many teenage pregnancies are from lack of boundaries. That's why you find some of them are from trusted adults. They are from trusted spiritual leaders. They are even from relatives. It's not raping as such, although it is actually rape, because you are taking advantage of the younger person. But the truth is, if only they had set boundaries, it would never have happened. They need to be taught very early, a girl needs to be taught very early that there is no person, however important they regard themselves to be, who is allowed to touch them inappropriately. A man and a woman are not supposed to be embracing inappropriately. And you should be able to say, sorry, you can't do that to me. That's the way you maintain respect. Even actual sex rapes are done because the friend feels you tap the shoulder, she doesn't say anything. You go to the waist, she doesn't say anything. So some boys actually say that when a girl says no, she means yes. Setting boundaries means you are clear in every relationship. They can come this far and no further. Of course, when you say no, they may drop you as friends. That's why when you are a Christian, you have to set boundaries, because the most important relationship you have is with God, and He will never leave you nor forsake you. It's a promise He has given us. So that way, because you have confidence in God, you are able to say no to even people you regard as very special to you. But if they are going beyond their boundary, you just say no. Whether they are friends or whether they are your benefactors, they are the ones paying your school fees. They are the ones doing whatever. You know very well that God is the source of your school fees, using your uncle, or using your cousin, or using whatever. So even if the cousin refused to pay your school fees, the source is still there. God will find a way of paying school fees for you. So we must teach the young believer that it's not unchristian to tell a pastor, to tell a bishop, you can't do that. You can't touch me like that. You know, even businesses later in life collapse due to this lack of boundaries. Can your relative come and take items from your shop without paying for them? That's a lack of boundaries. It needs to be clear there are things you do as a business, and even your relatives cannot break those rules, because those are the rules of the business. That is setting boundaries. So whether it's a friend or a relative or whoever, because these are the critical, you need to set boundaries. You also need to set boundaries yourself, the places you can go and the places you cannot go. Because you know yourself, you know your weaknesses, and you do not want to expose yourself to possible failure. That will be something that, you know, as you look into your future, this setting of boundaries will help you. My recommendation is that you don't become an optimist. It's not Christian to be an optimist. An optimist is a person who assumes nothing can go wrong. Everything must go right. That's not biblical. But of course, the Bible doesn't support pessimists either. Pessimists are people who always assume things will go wrong. That's not true. The Bible recommends that we are realists. And I cover this in my book, Leadership in David's Style. Because David was neither a pessimist nor an optimist. He was a realist. He faced his future with a proper factoring in of things that could go wrong and things could go right. But he was realistic enough to know, even if things could go wrong, if God is with you, you can face them. So he goes into serious risks, but clear that the risks are there. That's what we mean being a realist. You know, the other thing you must teach is that in setting boundaries, we are not recommending that you have an overinflated ego. Self-confident, I can do anything, I'm in. No, that's not true. The Bible does recommend that you have God confidence. In other words, you are going into something, you are setting those boundaries because you trust in God. You know you yourself, your weaknesses. So why would you have confidence in yourself? Have confidence in God. What I'm calling God confidence or confidence in God, rather than self-confidence or confidence in yourself. But for that to happen, this setting of boundaries, there are certain prerequisites. The first prerequisite is to accept yourself, to know that God did not make a mistake in creating you. So you should if God found you good, why should you not accept yourself the way you are? Okay, you are maybe, according to some people, you are too black. According to some people, you are too brown. According to some people, you are too short. According to some people, you are too tall. That is them. But the one who created you accepted you as you are. So the first way you can set boundaries is this idea of liking and accepting yourself. If you define yourself the way others define you, rather than the way God defines you, you will not be able to set boundaries because you are desperate to be liked. You are desperate to be. You don't even know who you are. You rely on what others are telling you are. A Christian must be taught that God did not make a mistake in creating you. So you must know you have self-worth because God is the one who created you and is the one who has saved you. Self-worth is finding intrinsic value in who you are so that you can be aware of yourself. Who you are includes, for example, your intellectual worth. You are entitled to your own thoughts. You are entitled to your own opinions, even as you are willing to listen to other people's things. Now, if you doubt your intellectual worth, then even if God gives you ideas, you always push yours down and allow other ideas to be the one to understand. And one of the things, of course, you need to understand is that when it's facts you don't argue about them. You just have to accept the facts as they are. But a lot of areas, intellectual areas we are dealing with are opinions. An opinion, I can have an opinion, you can have a different opinion, we can remain friends. So if you like yourself, you will be able to create boundaries that you have not convinced me on yours, I think I'm right. That is, you have intellectual worth. I believe God has given me ability to think. Another area you have to put a boundary is emotional worth. Here, you need to understand that you are entitled to your own feelings in a given situation. So do not feel like, oh, but others are smiling, they are laughing. If you don't like it, you don't like it. That's your emotional. In other words, you have a right to your emotions. Creating boundaries is not allowing other people to define your emotions because you believe in them. Don't feel like, oh, I'm indebted. If others don't feel like that, then there's something wrong with me. You need to come to where you accept the way God has created you, your emotional worth. Maybe you are dealing with a person who has no emotions. Why would you want to copy him? The other thing we are talking about is, in this liking and accepting yourself, is accepting you have physical worth. You are entitled to your space, however wide it may be. You have physical worth, where you are, where you stay. It may not be as good a house as so-and-so's. How you look may not be as good as so-and-so's. But you should like it yourself, even if others don't like it. And then don't allow people to define what you like in your physical worth. But it's also the issue of social worth. Here, we are saying that I am entitled to my own friends. And also, I choose what social activities to be involved in or not to be involved in. That's what they are calling social worth. If you don't think you have any social worth, then you would be doing only what others are telling you is good to do. In other words, you shouldn't be having friends who don't listen to you, who don't take any suggestion you have as important. That's not good friendship. That's slavery. Social worth means I'll listen to you, but you also must listen to me. And I'll put a boundary that there are some things I don't like doing, so I will not be involved in those kind of activities. Create a boundary. So there are things people now know, don't involve John in that one. He doesn't like that kind of an area. And they will still value you, even if you have not agreed on an area, because you are important. You have social worth. They also are happy with your company. So they will stop doing certain things when you are there, because you are worth, and they find you worth. You yourself must start by accepting you are worthy. That's the way you have the ability to create boundaries. But the most important of all worths is spiritual worth. That I'm entitled to my own spiritual beliefs. That you and God have to have a personal relationship where your parents can't enter into it, your pastor can't enter into it. You need to know God for yourself. That's a New Testament theology, where the priesthood of all believers means anybody can take themselves direct to God. That doesn't mean that it's bad to ask for prayers from people. No, people have different gifts, and you can ask them to pray. But you must know that you yourself are able to pray, and God is willing to listen to you, and God is willing to answer your prayer. That way, you are able to say, you don't have to come. I can pray. I can pray for myself. So that people do not make you a spiritual slave. That's what a new believer needs to be taught. They must accept that God has not made a mistake in the way He has created them. So even not the issue of sin, and sin is factual. The Bible tells you what sin is. So don't do sins. That would be one of the boundaries, that I will not be involved in anything that's unbiblical. Put a boundary. But beyond that, you need to understand clearly the people that will be with you are people that are also agreeing with your biblical direction. Let's look at what the Bible says about this issue. Look at Galatians chapter 6. In this idea of creating boundary between you and others. Verse 2 says, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6:3, if anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. In this creating of boundaries, it is discouraging you, in verse 4, from comparing yourself with others. Each of us is born an original, unique. Accept yourself that way. So you don't spend time comparing yourself with someone else. Understand that God has made you uniquely. Therefore, you will not be exactly like anybody else. But having said that, the Bible does encourage you to think about others. That's what verse 2 is saying. Carry each other's burdens. Means you should be seeking to help people God brings your way. But it also tells you, you should not think you are something when you are not. Deceiving yourself. So we are not suggesting some, again I repeat, inflated ego. The passage is telling you, don't think yourself more higher than you are. So you should test your own actions, test your own beliefs. Are they from proper motives? Are you assessing yourself correctly? I think that is important in this setting of boundaries. And then it's going to teach you to, then they can take pride in themselves alone. In other words, you are happy with yourself because you have been tested, you have allowed God to check you up. You're happy with yourself, but not because you are comparing yourself with others. But finally, in verse 5, it's saying, for each one should carry their own load. So this passage in Galatians 6 is the one that tells you, think about other people's burdens, help them to carry it. But you yourself should not seek other people to carry your burden. For each one should carry their own load. So we are encouraged to help others, but you're not encouraged to be dependent upon others. So, in relationships with the people, you can be a dependent, and that means you're always thinking people should owe you something. When you're a child, yes. When you're an adult, you should look after your own needs. God is your provider, not another human being. Work with your own hands. Provide for yourself. Don't depend on others. If that means you live in a certain level, standard of living rather than a higher one, accept your standard of living, depending on the way God has blessed the work of your hands. Don't be dependent on people. Always, hey, help me here, help me here, help me there. No. Each one should carry their own load. That means they must not be dependent on others. There's another negative thing which is called independence, where you don't want help, you are rude to people and they want to help you. That's wrong. Because you have just read in the passage that we should that people can help you. Don't ask them for help, but people can help you if they choose. And if they don't help you, you have no problem. Because you are looking to God, and God can either provide you direct or use others to help you. If that God uses them, you are not independent of others. God can use others. And it's Him providing, but He's using others. So the right word we need to use is, in creating these boundaries, we must understand we are interdependents. Interdependent means we are neither dependent nor independent. We relate with one another. We help even as they help us. That's how you create boundaries. You create a boundary that you don't become dependent on others. You create a boundary where you yourself are seeking to help others, but you're not seeking for them to help you. That's the kind of boundary we are talking about. I think this is still mentioned in Philippians chapter 2, verse 19. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive the news about you. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out to their own interest, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as I see how things go with me. And I'm confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. Can you see Paul's idea about confidence? It's not self-confidence. He didn't know whether he would be released from jail. He didn't know. He did not talk about, positive thinking. He says clearly, I actually am confident in the Lord. That means he doesn't have self-confidence. He has God confidence. And it is that creating of and reliance on God that will allow you not to allow other people to run into your life. where they should not go, to go beyond the boundary and interfere with your privacy, with your life. Because you know you are confident, like Paul. You are confident in the Lord, not in yourself and not in others. After all, some people had failed him. He is saying, Timothy, I have no one, somebody who will show genuine concern. Everyone looks out on their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. That's how you're describing his friends. So I think it will be important to understand that. You know, the reason he is speaking like that, there's a guy called Epaphroditus. Look at verse 5. But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. Verse 26, Philippians 2:26. For he longs for all of you and is distressed because you heard he was ill. Paul is teaching us about what is wrong with being dependent. Here it's a Epaphroditus. He is unhappy, actually distressed, because the church in Philippi had heard he was sick. People who are dependent get sick and they want the whole world to get sick. They are in hospital and I'm wondering why hasn't so and so visited? Why not so and so? You came 3 days ago. Why didn't you come yesterday? That's not Epaphroditus. That's not the example Paul is giving us. In fact, in verse 27 he says, if truth be told, indeed, Epaphroditus was ill and almost died. But he still did not want his sickness to affect other people. Creating boundaries means becoming dependent on God and allowing God to use whoever he uses, but not having a problem because the people God has not chosen to use this one. So you remain friends even with people who never helped you at the time you had a problem, because you are not looking for help from them. You know, healthy personal boundaries and are the physical, emotional, and mental limits you place on the outside world, not to enter within your area. We establish them to protect ourselves from being manipulated. That's why you are creating boundaries. No man of God will manipulate you when you have set up your boundaries. No man of God, no parent, no cousin will use you, like the ones you talked about, rape. And you will not be violated if you create those boundaries. That means people know with so and so you cannot go beyond here. They allow us, boundaries allow us to separate who we are and what we think, what we feel, from the thoughts and feelings of outsiders. So you need to create boundaries, and then once those boundaries are created, people close to you, you must tell them, I don't go beyond that. Here, I like my me time. And that is not un-Christian. So these powers and boundaries then are your personal guidelines, or maybe you could call them rules or limits that you have created so that others cannot come in beyond them. You know, these boundaries identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways of relating with others. It has to be reasonable. Don't create boundaries that make you break the Bible itself. They have to be reasonable. They have to be safe. They have to be permissible. And that's important. Boundaries show how other people behave towards you. So that's why you are creating, and how you will respond when someone passes those limits. Impunity is allowing somebody to pass the boundary and you say nothing. Surely you can't blame him next time he now takes advantage of it. You are the one who didn't. If it's the boundary, then you cannot allow anybody to break that boundary. You are ready to pay the price of having stopped somebody in that. Your confidence is in God, so you believe even if he withdraws his support, you will still be okay, because what you are doing honors God. To start setting your boundaries straight, Let me suggest a few things you can do. Ask yourself, what are the intellectual limits allowing others books? For me, one boundary is if anything is not in line with the Bible, the first position is to say no. I'll still study it because it's important to see whether it's me misunderstanding. But the Bible is a boundary for me on what I can think and not think. The same thing with the emotional boundary, physical boundary, and spiritual boundaries. I use the Bible as my limit. So, and you see, when you're setting these boundaries, you must set the boundaries with the strangers. And the boundary with stranger will not be the boundary with your mother. So different people have different boundaries. So you cannot allow a total stranger whom you don't know that you ended up in a room with a man whom you have met for the first time. Now that the boundary for a stranger will be far much higher than for somebody close. But there are also boundaries for work colleagues, people you are with continuously. They will be allowed certain latitudes, but not beyond a certain level. And as you study people and understand them, there will be boundaries. You also have to create boundaries for people you call friends. They may not exactly be the same as a stranger. Your own personal family surely would have a different level of boundaries. Because these are people you have grown with, people you trust. But there's also the question of your spouse, somebody intimate. The boundary cannot be the same. You cannot treat your spouse like you treat outsiders. There will be a problem. Each of them would have a different set of boundaries. And that will be important. So once you have set boundaries, don't be rude, but be assertive. To be assertive does not mean being violent. It means, I mean it. No, don't go beyond. I mean this. You are being assertive. And it's a biblical thing to be assertive. It may be difficult initially, especially if you are depending on your personality. But remember, practice makes perfect. When you learn to say no, when somebody crosses the boundary, it makes it easier to say no next time to somebody else. But of course, sometimes there are people who refuse to be given the boundaries. If you have done your best to explain and they still don't want, then obviously you can delete them from your relationship. You can ignore them. You can become unavailable. But I don't think that the Bible would encourage you to fail to relate with the people. The Bible encourages you to relate with them, but with boundaries. Because how will you obey the Great Commission of witnessing if you put boundaries that prevent you relating with people? So you must relate with them, but within set boundaries. So, but initially, it's the work of the parents to teach the child to set boundaries. And when you set the boundary for your child, that's a sign of showing them love. Tell them, no, you can't come beyond 7 o'clock. These are for your teenagers. When you tell them they can't come late, it's not a sign that you don't give them freedom. It's that your freedom has boundaries. As they get older, you move from 6 o'clock curfew to 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, depending on how they can be trusted. But a parent must teach the child that they can't do anything they want to do. They cannot eat just anything they want to eat. There are boundaries the parents set. And as you set the boundary, it makes the child know the value of boundaries himself, because he grows knowing you don't do just anything with anybody. So set boundaries, but then allow the boundaries to be expanded as the child gets older and older. Then the child will start understanding the boundaries are set in love, and they are not meant to be a joy spoiler. That boundaries are the ones that help you to enjoy your life. Without them, you will not truly have an enjoyable life. So let's teach every young believer the importance of using the Bible as a guide in setting boundaries as you relate with the others in church and outside of church.